With NIM onboarding, you provide new users with secure access without having to communicate passwords. The user's account is prepared in advance but becomes active only after the user completes the onboarding process. Through the onboarding process, the user verifies their identity using HR data and an SMS or email code, and then sets their own password. This ensures that passwords are not communicated in an unsecure manner and that new users are able to gain prompt access to their accounts. To use NIM's onboarding features, you must fulfill the following. NIM must connect to a target system that holds user account information. In this case, we are connecting to Active Directory. However, systems such as Entra, Azure, and Google Workspace are also fully supported. NIM must connect to a source system that holds user data for questions, answers, and notifications. This is typically an HR or SIS database. NIM must be able to send emails and SMS messages, and HTTPS must be configured with a valid certificate. With these all accomplished, we will continue to part 1 of the tutorial. We will begin setting up and preparing your data for onboarding. Then insert it into NIM's onboarding system. All onboarding records are stored in NIM's onboarding table. Directly after installation, this table is not yet enabled for use. We will use these steps to enable the onboarding table, configure it to store onboarding data, and relate its records to a target system. Click the internal system. Under the Configuration tab, make sure the onboarding table is selected. After this, expand the internal system and select the onboarding table. Go to the Columns tab and ensure the ID column is marked as a key. Next, a relationship must be created between the external ID column of the onboarding table and a target system table. In this case, AD, users. In our A relation, we select the AD system, the users table, and the employee ID column, although this might change depending on your specific systems. Inside of our B relation, we select the internal system, the onboarding table, and the external ID column. Now we will create the necessary filters to drive the onboarding process. One will insert user records into the onboarding table, and the other will be used to look up an individual onboarding record. Start by creating a new filter and name it onboarding_employee_create. This filter should return active users who do not currently have an onboarding record. Include columns such as employee ID, personal phone number, and personal email. These will be used later in a mappings to create the onboarding records. Phone number and emails are likely held within your personnel database. In the case of our filter, you can see we connect to our HRMS system. However, your filter may be very different from our example depending on the structure of your personnel database. Adjust accordingly. In the case of this filter, we have made it look for AD users who do not have a record in the internal onboarding system, are enabled, and are employees. This may return more users than you may ideally want, and we could add an additional expression that only returns users recently added to your system. Now, we need to save our filter, but we aren't finished quite yet. We need to add 2 script columns within it, calc_onboard expires and calc_secure ID. First, we will add calc onboard expires. This generates a date object for the onboarding profile to use as an expiration date. Adjust the number of days you want the profile to be accessible by changing the 7 to the number of days needed. This will prevent an onboarding record from being accessible for all time, which would create a security risk. We also need calc secure ID, which generates the unique secure ID that will be used for each user's onboarding profile. This ID will be used as part of a link sent to the user so that they may quickly and easily access their onboarding record. Both of the code snippets for these script columns can be found on the doc site in the onboarding tutorial step 1. 1 filter down, 1 to go. Create a new filter and name it onboarding_employee_lookup. When a new user goes through the onboarding process, this filter is used to look up their onboarding record and provide its details to NIM. This will be a parameter-based filter that will accept one parameter, external ID. This parameter is then used to filter on the external ID column of the onboarding table. Our filter configuration shown here looks for AD users with onboarding present with a specific external ID. You will need to add a parameter to achieve this filter configuration. Name it external ID. The type should be input, and the data type should be string. Now we need to use the data from our onboarding employee create filter to create onboarding records. This is done by feeding the results of the filter into a mapping and running that mapping as part of a job. Head to your mapping section and create a new mapping with system internal, target onboarding, function onboard _ create. In this example, we will name it onboarding _ employee _ create. In the filter dropdown, select the onboarding employee create filter you created previously. Map all fields accordingly using our currently shown filter as an example. Some fields, such as profile and mail address label, should be set manually to a constant value. The profile field value will need to match the name of an onboarding profile, which we will create in our next steps. In this example, we are calling it employee onboarding. After saving the filter, create a new job. We are going to name it onboarding _ create. Under the Configuration tab of the job, add a new CRUD task and select the mapping you just created. We will now evaluate and run the job at this time and create all of the onboarding records. Alternatively, you may also add the job to a task schedule and run it at a recurring time. Now all of our onboarding records have been created, we can now begin to create the onboarding profile. Onboarding profiles contain the settings and configurations that tie each onboarding component together and define how they interact. They control which forms are displayed to the end user and how they are challenged to prove their identity, either via OTP code or a question and answer combination. It is possible that your organization may need to use more than one onboarding profile, depending on your use case. For example, a school may onboard students with a question and answer challenge, but employees onboard with an OTP code. Additional details about the onboarding profile and resulting forms can be found on the doc site under the appropriate section of the Onboarding Tutorial Step 2. Let's create our onboarding profile now. Go to Configuration Onboarding. Click Add to create a new onboarding profile. Remember, you need to provide it the same name as the profile field in the mapping you created previously. In the top section of the profile, configure the drop-down fields as shown. Under Onboarding App, select Onboarding. Under Question Answer Filter, select the Onboarding Employee Lookup filter you created earlier, and select Message for the remaining two drop-downs on the right. Next, we choose how users will verify their identities in this onboarding profile. You have two options, OTP code or question and answer challenge. In this case, we will be using OTP code. However, the details to a question and answer challenge are located on the doc site under the appropriate section of the Onboarding Tutorial Step 2. NIM can validate a user's identity by sending them an OTP code, either to their email or their SMS-enabled mobile device. After providing that code back to NIM, the user can reset their password and begin using their account. We need to meet two requirements to use this feature. NIM must be able to send emails and SMS messages, and the user must have either an email or a mobile phone number in their onboarding record. If these requirements are met, we can continue forming our onboarding profile to verify a user's identity through an OTP code. In the Onboarding Profile Forms section, click the Add button 6 times to add 6 form entries, one for each screen of the onboarding process. If you want to challenge users with more than one question, add on another form for each additional question. For each entry, use the drop-down menus to set the form name, form function, form variable, and onboard variable fields. On the password form entry, select the Execute and Notification options. Your section should look like ours. After saving, you can customize the form contents. Each form within the onboarding process contains placeholder text. These placeholders have default values, but you should customize them to suit your needs. For example, the default text in the question text form prompts for an employee ID. Instead, you may want to prompt the users for their mother's maiden name or their birth year. Click on one of the forms under Onboarding Profile Forms. In this case, we are changing 2 sections, which will be used later in our example. Repeat these steps for each form you need to customize. This is particularly important for the summary form, which displays the strings username and password instead of the variables you are using. You will need to come back to this step after setting up the form actions in the next part of this tutorial and replace those strings with the proper variable names. When you are finished, save the form. In the next step, we will configure the action variables and onboarding actions. After a user has positively identified themselves, NIM must take their new password and apply it to their account. In order to do that, we must tell NIM where to find the user account identifier, and we must supply some additional data for logging purposes. This is all done through action variables and onboarding actions. Setting the action variables allow NIM to retrieve data from the question-answer filter that was set up earlier. The most important piece of data here is the unique identifier of the user's account within the target system, such as object GUID from Active Directory. Follow these instructions to configure an onboarding action. Within your onboarding profile, navigate to the Action Variables tab. In the filter column list, you can see all of the columns being returned by the question-answer filter that was configured earlier. If you do not see a column here that you need, you can update the filter to add any necessary columns and then return here. Click the play button next to any field you wish to reference during the onboarding process. This will auto-generate and assign a variable to that field. For Active Directory, we recommend the following: Object GUID. This will be used by NIM to target their account and complete the onboarding process. SAM account name. This will be used for logging and notifications. Display name. This will also be used for logging and notifications. In this example, we will also select mail, which was chosen for our earlier form customization. We can now save the variables and move on to configuring onboarding actions. Onboarding actions are similar to mappings. They tell NIM what to do in a target system when a user completes the onboarding process. These actions are launched when a form with the execute option selected is submitted. The actions then reference the action variables you configured in the previous steps. The data within these variables is then used to update the user's accounts in target systems. Each onboarding action is triggered one after another in a top-down fashion. These actions typically perform password reset operations in a target system, such as Active Directory or Google Workspace. However, any target system action is supported. Follow these steps to configure an onboarding action. In this case, we are setting the user's password in Active Directory. Within the onboarding profile, navigate to the Onboarding Actions tab. Click Add to add a new action, and then select it. In the description field, enter VO display name VO SAM account name has completed onboarding. Note that if you change the action variable names for display name and SAM account name, you will have to update the variables here to match. In the System drop-down, select the Active Directory system. Then in the Function drop-down, select User Update. In the Input tab, set the attributes as shown here. Object GUID will be set to variable, with a value to match. Account password will also be set to variable, with a value to match. Change password at logon will be given a constant value of false. Lastly, enabled will be given a constant value of true. With that completed, click Save. Now we can configure the end-user notifications. Good communication is part of an effective onboarding process. New users should be notified of their ability to onboard. If you are using OTP codes to validate their identity, these must be sent out to the user as well. Additionally, IT and/or management may want to be notified when a new user completes the onboarding process. Follow along with the next steps to configure these types of notifications. We will start by configuring the end-user welcome email. When an onboarding record is provisioned, NIM can send the end user an email that welcomes them to the organization and provides them a personalized link to the onboarding process. This link uses the secure ID value that was generated for their record and bypasses the need for them to supply their unique identifier, for example, employee ID. Navigate to Events, Templates, then add a new template. We are naming it employee_onboarding_welcome. In the notification event dropdown, select Mapping, onboarding_employee_create. In the to-field, type or use the append button to add the variable var.event.argument.mailaddress1, or whichever field you mapped the personal email address to. Provide a suitable subject for the email, then in the body, provide a suitable message. Be sure to include a URL or hyperlink constructed of the shown variables, which the user can visit to claim their account and bypass the need for identity verification. This variable is also located on the doc site under the appropriate section of the Onboarding tutorial Step 4 if you would like to copy-paste it directly. After this is complete, save the template, then navigate to Events, Actions. Add a new action. Set the event type to Mapping and select the mapping that provisions your onboarding records in the event name dropdown. In the template dropdown, select the name of the event template you created earlier, then save. Now we will configure the OTP verification email message. To confirm their identity, NIM will send end users a one-time passcode token. During onboarding, users can choose to receive the code via email or SMS text message, depending on the methods listed in their onboarding profile. The following steps show you how to create a template and event to handle email notifications. Navigate to Events Templates, then add a new template. In the Notification Event dropdown, select Onboarding Code Mail Employee Onboarding. In the To field, type or use the Append button to add the variable shown. This variable contains the address the end user selected to receive their OTP token. This variable is also located on the doc site under the appropriate section of the Onboarding tutorial Step 4 if you would like to copy-paste it directly. Provide a suitable subject for the email, then do the same for the body. Be sure to include the variable var.event.data.vo confirmation code, which contains the OTP token for the end user. Once that's finished, save the template and navigate to Events, Actions. Add a new action. Set the event type to Onboarding Code Email and select your onboarding profile name in the Event Name dropdown. In the Template dropdown, select the name of the event template you created earlier, then click Save. Information on sending the OTP through SMS verification instead can be found on the doc site under the appropriate section of the Onboarding tutorial Step 4. We are now ready for testing. Before publishing NIM's onboarding system to your organization, you should test it to make sure it works properly and that the entire process goes smoothly. Before you begin testing, go through the following checklist. Does your internal onboarding table have records in it? Is NIM able to successfully send emails and SMS messages? Is HTTPS properly configured with a valid certificate? If you answered yes to each of those questions, we can proceed to testing. Follow these steps to test the onboarding process as one of the users inside the onboarding table. This can be your own record or that of another user within the organization. Navigate to System's internal onboarding. Search for the unique identifier of a user you want to test with, yourself or another user. This unique identifier should be in the External ID column. If you found the record, move on to the next steps. If not, choose a different one or revisit your filters in Part 1 of this tutorial. Next, follow these steps to test the question-answer filter. This is the filter that looks up an onboarding user's record after they enter their unique identifier, such as employee ID, or click on the secure onboarding link that is sent to them via email. Navigate to Processing Filters. Open your question-answer filter. Under the Parameters tab, provide the unique identifier of the user from previous steps into the default value field of the External ID parameter. Click the Filter button. If the filter returns a single result belonging to the person whose unique identifier you provided, then you can move on to the next steps. If not, you will need to troubleshoot the filter's logic and settings. If you need assistance, contact support. Finally, we will test the onboarding process itself. Open a web browser and navigate to the URL shown on screen. NIM server is the external host URL value configured in System Preferences. Onboarding profile is the name of the onboarding profile that you created in Part 2 of this tutorial. This value is case sensitive. You should see a screen like the one shown here. Click Next. You should be prompted for a unique identifier. Enter the unique identifier of the user from previous steps into the text box and click Next again. The contents of the following screen depend on whether you chose to validate users' identities via OTP code or via a question and answer challenge. Either select a method to receive the OTP code, mobile or email, or answer the challenge question. If you have configured more than one question in your onboarding profile, you will need to go through all configured questions before reaching the new password prompt. Then click Next. If you are validating users through an OTP code, the next screen will prompt you to enter the code. If you have received the code through the chosen method, enter it into the confirmation box and click Next. The next screen will prompt you for a new password. Type the new password into both boxes and click Next. NIM will then execute all onboarding actions that you configured in Part 3 of this tutorial. If the actions are run successfully, you will see the summary screen as shown. If you were able to go through all parts of the onboarding application without error, your next step is to log into the target user account with the password you provided in Step 5. If you are able to log in, then your onboarding process is properly configured and is now usable by your organization. Thanks for joining us in this NIM tutorial on the onboarding feature. See you in the next one.